Welcome to Ideagen TV. Today we have with us one of the most special guests to ever join us on Ideagen TV, Dr. Sidhant Gupta, Director of Product Incubation. I'm going to say it one more time, Director of Product Incubation at Microsoft, and he also happens to be Chairman of the Board here at Ideagen. Dr. Gupta, Sidhant, welcome.
Thank you, George. Thank you for such a warm welcome.
Well, you know, we've encountered many global leaders over the years, as you know, at Ideagen, and you are at the very top of the list of people changing the world consistently. Your dedication to changing the world has been evident from the very first time we met you, and your belief in the mission of Ideagen has been steadfast. And for that, we want to say we are incredibly grateful to you always for that and for your leadership and for your inspiration. And today, you will be leading what I believe will be an incredible interview. I'd like to turn it over to you, Sidhant, and look forward to the inspiration that I'm certain will come out of this interview.
Thank you, George. I'm humbled, but let me bring in my guest, Dan Morris, who's actually changing the world rather than you giving credit to me, George. Dan, welcome. Dan and I go back almost 15 years now. Started in academia. I did one of my first internships as a young student with Dan, working on some, really interesting technologies on the human body, things that people wear, walk around, the early days of wearable technology. So Dan, welcome. And so you've moved on. You've been doing a lot of things. Went from academics to being a scientist, and then we were on the same team. We did some great things together, and now you've turned what, in my opinion, is both your personal passion of conservation and kind of giving back to the world, taking care of the world, and you've made it your profession. So we're going to touch upon that. And the reason I thought you were the perfect person is in the context of SDG 15, which is life on land. I felt like the work you're doing with conserving the biodiversity, some of anti-poaching programs that you've put together. I really wanted to get your thoughts on the work you're doing. So Dan, you are the program director for AI for Earth. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background before we dive into learning more about the work you're doing?
Sure. So like I said, I'll break the fourth wall for a second. I worked in Sidhant, the same group as Sidhant, for close to 12 years and worked with amazing people. I miss all of you all every day. We did amazing work and I loved it. But sometime around 2017, I basically just had a midlife crisis and I said, I really want to work on conservation. And I had the very good luck of having my midlife crisis just as one of our colleagues in Microsoft Research was starting the AI for Earth program at the time. And so I asked 7,000 times, can I come work with you? Can I come work with you? And it all worked out. And now I run the AI for Earth program. Lucas, who started the program, is now Microsoft's Chief Environmental Officer. And I've taken over the AI for Earth program from him. So yes, midlife crisis mission accomplished.
That's a wonderful way of putting it. Well, that's great. So AI for Earth, our mission statement there is that AI for Earth puts Microsoft's cloud and AI tools in the hands of those working to solve global environmental challenges. Can you dig a little bit deeper and tell us how we're applying some of our tools to global environmental challenges?
I would love to. And I'm an engineer at heart, so I will give you a bulleted list of the things we do to put Microsoft's tools in the hands of environmental scientists. So everything we do is about putting Azure to work for environmental sustainability. We basically do that in three ways. So we are a grants program. We give stuff away to other folks working at the intersection of machine learning and environmental sustainability. We have all different kinds of grants. I won't bore you with the mechanics of our grants program. We have Azure credit grants, we have financial grants, but we have over 600 grantees in over 80 different countries. And we work really hard, not just to give them cloud credits and check a box and say, hey, environmental scientists, good luck with the cloud. We also couple our grants program very closely with an education program. So we work really hard to make sure that all of our grantees have a successful journey to Azure and really learn how to use the cloud in their work and are able to scale their the work that they're doing. So that's our grants program. We are increasingly also a data program. So we are responsible for hosting on Azure the typically very large geospatial data sets that are critical to environmental science. When you're an environmental scientist and you work with 4 petabytes of satellite imagery, you can't reasonably be expected to bring that imagery with you for your project. So it's our job to make sure that those critical data sets are available on Azure and easily accessible. And then lastly, we also are a technology development program. So we build a number of tools, particularly machine learning tools, to accelerate environmental science workflows. So basically, as we are sitting here on this call, environmental scientists, particularly conservation biologists all over the world, are doing some really boring and repetitive things, and we'd really like to be able to use machine learning and computer vision in particular to help them answer questions more efficiently and make the most of scarce conservation resources.
Wow, that's I actually did not know that we had such a deep and wide program here. So help me understand something then. If you look at the history of humankind, and especially recent years and decades, we've neglected the environment. No matter how you put it, we've neglected the environment, right? And I see large corporations throughout throw marketing terms around, we are doing this, we are doing that. And when I look at kind of Microsoft program, amongst a few other corporations that is doing this, this seems like a really serious effort, a concerted effort to actually make a positive impact on the environment. And I can connect the dots back to kind of the ethos of our company, the culture, and kind of how we think about people and the planet we live on. But in your mind, can you share with us kind of where did this come from? Where does this culture of serious impact for the environment, a positive impact on the environment, came into being at Microsoft? Like, what's the history here? How did we find ourselves in such a leadership position in helping even scientists have a better impact on the environment?
Absolutely. So it's actually, first of all, AI for Earth is just a part of our larger environmental sustainability program. So, and it's not even the largest part. And so actually our corporate commitment to environmental protection is much broader than AI for Earth. Think of us as supporting the external environmental science community, but we also have made pretty substantial commitments over the last few months to be a carbon negative company, to protect more land than we use, and to protect more water than we use as a company. And those are important operational commitments that we're making and trying to be leaders in this space. And AI for Earth is just a part of all that. And in terms of how Microsoft got here and why we do this, so I come to work every day, and my manager tells me that my job is to have impact on environmental sustainability. I believe that is what we live every day. And when people ask me why, I tell everyone to turn their cynicism knob to wherever they like on the cynicism dial. There is certainly a philanthropic component to what we do. But although at the other end, we really believe as a company that environmental sustainability is increasingly important to our business. It's important to the overall size of the market that we serve, and our customers are increasingly coming to Microsoft and choosing Microsoft because of our environmental sustainability commitments, and choosing Microsoft because we can help them be more environmentally sustainable companies. So there's certainly an important business aspect to, we really believe that environmental sustainability is going to be a growing part of the services that Microsoft makes available to our customers. And the tools that we build in AI for Earth, we believe are going to be increasingly in demand by our customers who want to monitor their environmental impact and want to mitigate their environmental impact as well. So like I said, I encourage everybody, there's certainly a philanthropic component to what we do. My immediate commitment is environmental impact, and I encourage everyone to be as cynical or not cynical as you want. Either way, we believe that environmental sustainability is incredibly important to Microsoft and to our business.
That's amazing. And I love the fact that how we at Microsoft have figured out how environment sustainability intersects with our future business goals. And these are future about 50 years out, right? As I see, we're projecting where the world will be, what resources will we need, and what would be the new problems that the world would be facing, and we are sort of preparing for those. So this is super proud of the work you're doing, and I'm proud to be working at Microsoft, where folks like you that really had a personal passion for conservation and environmental impact have turned it into a professional, an amazing professional career. So kudos. So help our viewers and me understand, Dan, do you want to share a few projects that you worked on? I've come across a few of the really cool projects you worked on, but I want to hear what are you up to right now? Some concrete projects that we can learn about, something you can share.
Certainly. I'll also stress that I'll tell you about some of the projects that we are working on, because I know I'm talking to you, Sidhant, and we want to talk technology. But there's also, I want to remind us, I'll talk about some of the tools we are building at Microsoft, but in a way, the heart of our program is not the tools we're building, it's the tools that our AI for Earth grantees are building. So I'll tell you some of their stories. If we want to talk shop, I think we're going to have fun talking about the projects we're working on at Microsoft. But if you check out our webpage, we have a ton of our AI for Earth grantees stories there, and they're in many ways the stars and the heart of our program. I'll give you an example of one of our grantees. So we've supported a startup called, we support all kinds of organizations. We support academics, NGOs, and startups. We've supported a startup called Sylvia Terra that uses remote sensing data and machine learning to produce a nationwide US forest inventory to enable a market for preserving forest on privately held forest in the US, which is a really powerful tool for protecting natural habitats and for mitigating climate change. And we love to see our grantees in that translational space of really finding sustainable business models, leveraging work that can only really be done at that scale on the cloud and having positive environmental impact. That's just one. I wish I could tell you all 600 something stories of our grantees, but so go check out our webpage for more. But Sylvia Terra is just one example of what the cloud can do that you just literally couldn't do before the cloud. The closest you could get is trying to walk around and survey every tree in the United States. And now with the power of remote sensing data and machine learning on the cloud, you can do a lot of those things just using remote sensing data.
So to help me better understand that, so this startup, you're providing them with tools, technologies, and assets to particularly help with conserving privately held forest regions. And I presume that satellite imagery is a component of this. So,
That's right.
give me an example precisely of how that conservation would happen, because I honestly actually don't understand any part of it.
Sure. I'll actually also use that as a segue to talk about some of the other work that we're doing, some of the code I write every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sylvia Terra is one of many organizations that uses satellite and aerial imagery to get a sense of what's happening on the ground, in particular in this case, to survey the extent of forests and in many cases, survey small patches of forest and classify them down to the individual tree species level. And the idea behind Sylvia Terra's business model is that if right now, much of the forest in the United States is privately held. And right now there is every financial incentive for private owners to cut down those trees because land has value and timber has value. And if we want to ask private landholders not to remove valuable forest that sequesters carbon and provides wildlife habitat, we have to create a financial model that incentivizes them not to cut down forests. And we can't do that without having both a marketplace where carbon offset purchasers can go and pay those individual landholders, and a way of actually verifying that without literally walking to every privately held land plot in the United States. And that's really where the power of remote sensing data and machine learning comes in, so that we can actually monitor deforestation on the ground, particularly in places where zero deforestation commitments have been made.
Wow, that is very interesting. So in other words, the bottom line is private landowners have an incentive, obviously, a monetary incentive to cut down those trees. Like you mentioned, land has value and timber has value. And you're offsetting that through, large corporations or even small, a marketplace that's interested in paying for keeping those trees in place where they are. That's fascinating. And so okay, that's very interesting. And so you apply remote sensing, aerial imagery, and analytics to figure out if you're paying for a certain land, offsetting a particular landowner, is it staying the same? Is it changing? Is it getting deforested? That's the sort of things you're monitoring.
That's certainly the gist of it. And again, I would say here, you isn't me in this case. You is Sylvia Terra. What we do in many ways is provide them with the tools to scale that work on Azure, including making data available on Azure. I mentioned that's an important part of what we do as the AI for Earth program. If you go in, for example, if you look at our webpage or the Azure Open Data Sets program, you will see a collection of large geospatial data sets that serve applications just like this, that serve environmental science applications, that serve wildlife conservation applications, and that serve commercial applications like Sylvia Terra. So for example, they leverage both imagery from the National Agricultural Imaging Program, or NAIP, which we make available on Azure for applications like this, and they leverage imagery from NASA's Landsat program that we make available on Azure. And again, this is really at the heart of what it means to scale on the cloud, because those data are large and it does not make sense for individual users to bring that data to the cloud. We want them to bring their compute to where the data is. And our job is to make sure that they have the data and the tools they need to do that kind of work. So a lot of the work we do is making sure that that data is in place and accessible. And you and I could talk forever. I think we'd bore everybody in this call. We can talk forever about the minutia of moving petabytes of data around, but that's a lot of the work we do to make sure that our grantees and the environmental sustainability community doesn't have to do that the data is there for them.
Yep. Wow, that's amazing. So switching gears a little bit, are you still managing and overseeing some of our wildlife conservation projects? Do we have any projects or grantees there, if you want to touch upon those?
Yeah, we have tons of grantees in the wildlife conservation space. I'll actually maybe use this area to talk about a little bit of the machine learning work that we do essentially in-house. So we do some first-party machine learning work. And I should also mention, for technical folks in the audience who are interested, everything I am about to talk about and really all of the machine learning work we do in the AI for Earth program is open source. So check it out and get involved. So for example, I mentioned earlier, a lot of the tools we build are intended to make environmental scientists, or in this case, wildlife biologists, more efficient at the work they do. We trust our collaborators to be asking important questions and solving important problems. We want them to be able to do that as efficiently as possible so they can answer time-critical questions as quickly as possible. So one example of an area where we have done a bunch of work is in accelerating the review of images from motion-triggered camera traps. So if you're a wildlife biologist and you want to know how many leopards there are in Serengeti National Park, you might go and put out anywhere from 1 to 1,000 motion-triggered cameras, and then you're probably going to go home and then come back in 6 months, and you're going to have anywhere from 5,000 to 50 million images to review to ask the conservation questions you want to ask about wildlife populations. And so not only are you going to spend a whole bunch of your time reviewing 50 million images, maybe 80% of which are empty, but you're also now that takes time, and whatever question you set out to ask is going to be answered later if it really takes you that much time to review those images. And if you're asking that question because somebody needs to build a road or make a decision about which areas to protect, if it takes you a year to review all those images, it may be too late to answer that question. So the work we do is to use computer vision to help wildlife biologists process those images more efficiently. And so we built a set of open source tools and models to review motion-triggered camera trap images, for example. And in particular, the work we do is there's a lot of really exciting computer vision work about species classification. We work on a much less glamorous problem that we think is super, super important, which is simply separating images of animals from all the images that aren't animals, which can be 99% of those 50 million images you have to go through. And we've helped over 50 organizations at this point at all scales and sizes get through their images more efficiently using computer vision. And I'll say the story is the same in so many other areas of conservation too, where, for example, folks doing aerial wildlife surveys, where you fly planes or drones to survey wildlife in some parts of the world, you got a lot, even in wildlife dense areas, you got a lot of empty images to go look through to count animals. Or folks using microphones or hydrophones, underwater microphones, to survey marine mammal populations, for example. You got a lot of recordings to listen to, only some of which actually have marine mammal audio in them. And so the story is the same in a lot of areas of conservation, and those are all problems that we've worked on to help folks use machine learning to process their data more efficiently and answer conservation questions more efficiently.
Yep. What's amazing to me in all of the examples you've given in the program is that Microsoft's AI for Earth is really acting like a powerful catalyst. So we are creating tools, although they may seem boring, like you said, let's scrub through 50 million images, is there an animal or not? I can totally see it saving 6 months of some grad student's time who would have otherwise scrubbed through all of that data just to say, oh yes, I see a leopard here, I don't see a leopard here. That is phenomenal. And it's really interesting how it can drive decisions which are time sensitive. I can imagine, you gave an example of a road or area to protect. Poaching comes to my mind is you can take immediate actions that can save some critical last few living specimens of that species. So phenomenal. You mentioned hydrophones. Do we have any under AI for Earth or some of our other conservation programs? Are we doing any work with, if I were to frame it in our SDGs, this was the Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is life underwater. So anything to do with aquatic, coral reefs, oceans, do we have any work there?
Yep, absolutely. I'll go in the opposite order. I'll start about some more AI for Earth, or really our larger AI for Good team has done in the machine learning space, and then talk about some of our grantees' work in this area. So another project I alluded to briefly is the use of hydrophones to study marine mammals. That's actually an area that one of my colleagues, Ming Zhang, on Microsoft's AI for Good team has done a whole bunch of work in, specifically working with collaborators at NOAA Fisheries, who are conveniently located here in Seattle near us, and we've worked on them with on a whole bunch of projects with them. In this particular case, they had a large archive and continue to collect a large amount of hydrophone data specifically to study beluga whale populations. And that is a super inefficient process, I have to say. As much as we do a lot of work in the camera trap space, and it is boring to look through millions of camera trap images, it is more boring to review lots of empty audio files. And so we have worked with them to build machine learning models that help to answer questions about specifically beluga whale populations more quickly. But the paradigm they're using is not specific to beluga whales. This is the hardware they're using and the overall process they're using is very common throughout the wildlife conservation community, and we think there's tons of room to scale that work to other parts of the world and other species where a lot of the fundamental questions are the same. I've got a whole bunch of data, and I have a question to answer, and I need to answer it as quickly as possible, and ideally move to as close to an automated workflow as we can get to any much closer to real-time answering of important conservation questions. So that's kind of some of our first-party work in that space. We've also supported through our grants program, supported a number of other organizations. One called Ocean Mind that uses AIS data, that is vessel traffic data and other remote sensing data, to try to predict instances of illegal fishing, which is a huge issue in ocean health. We've also supported some academic collaborators who are working with data from the Ocean Observatories Initiative, who maintain an amazing network of undersea cabled sensors to study video from the ocean floor and answer questions about marine life, really fundamental scientific questions about marine life in an area that we're really just beginning to study and understand. That video sensor, for example, just produces hundreds and hundreds of terabytes of data, and it requires the scale of the cloud to be able to efficiently process that. So those are examples of organizations we're supporting through our grants program to make sure that they have the resources they need to scale that work to the cloud.
Wow, that's phenomenal. I had no idea. Thank you for sharing that. So zooming out a little bit, if I were to put you in the hot seat here and say, if all of this work goes really well in sort of an ideal situation, how would you define success, 10, 15, 30 years from now for this program and kind of our positive impact on the environment?
Sure. Well, again, I think I'm really proud, outside of the AI for Earth program, really proud of the commitments that Microsoft has made on our own operations on about the 10-year time horizon. And I encourage everybody to go check those out to be carbon negative, to be land negative, meaning to protect more land than we use, and to be water negative, all in the next 10 years. We're really proud of the work we're doing there. We want to use that not only to, of course, have that direct environmental impact and to inspire our customers and competitors to do the same, but also in order to do that, we're going to have to build a whole bunch of tools that help us not only get that done, but monitor those commitments. And really we're forcing ourselves to build those tools and make those tools available to our customers. So as an overall company, I think on the 10-year horizon, I think we're really proud of the commitments we've made and looking forward to achieving those commitments and sharing publicly how our progress toward those commitments is going over the next 10 years. And then for the AI for Earth program specifically, we think of success as making sure that the environmental science community, and we think of our grantees as a representative slice of the environmental sustainability community, we want them to be able to work on the cloud as efficiently as they can possibly work. Our job, we trust them to be asking the important questions and doing the important work for environmental sustainability. And our job as a program is to make sure the tools are there so they can be as efficient as possible. And that means all the things we talked about today. If you're an environmental scientist, you shouldn't have to have a PhD in geospatial analysis or a PhD in distributed computing to go and ask questions from remote sensing data on the cloud. That's our job. And if you are working with large volumes of wildlife conservation data that comes from camera traps, for example, we have dropped the ball if people are still looking at every one of those images manually 10 years from now. That's really how we think of success for the AI for Earth program specifically, is our collaborators and eventually our Microsoft customers using the cloud for environmental sustainability as efficiently as they possibly can.
Wonderful. So before we conclude, Dan, a significant part of our viewership are young professionals and the youth. And I wanted to ask you, how can young professionals or even seasoned professionals and our youth get involved in kind of the work you're doing and have a positive impact on the environment?
Absolutely. So clearly, my easiest answer is we are in large part a grants program, and I encourage everyone doing technical work who might benefit from the cloud to go and check out our grants program and apply for any of our variety of grants, Azure credit grants, and any of our financial grants as well. I also encourage folks to get involved. Again, I'm targeting a somewhat technical audience, but to get involved in the conservation technology community, I can point folks to a couple of specific resources. There's a community called wildlabs.net that I'm a big fan of. They hold all kinds of, they're both a online forum-based community and a series of virtual meetups that have been fantastic. If you want to get started in conservation technology and learn what other folks are doing, I encourage everyone to go check out Wild Labs and get involved in their virtual meetups and their online tutorials. And I think that's a great place to get started. I think it's one of the most vibrant communities, specifically in the conservation technology space.
Wonderful. Thank you for those pointers. And we'll put this up on the screen so folks can go visit some of those resources you've mentioned, Dan. With that, Dan, I wanted to thank you. This is some amazing work we are doing on both Sustainable Development Goal 14 and 15. Thank you so much for sharing, and really proud of the work you're doing.
Thank you, too, and I look forward to coming back and visiting you in Building 99 sooner or later.
All right. Thank you.
See you later.